Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast with your host and content creator, Johnny FIORICA, who says the movie The Bad News Bears was just a documentary of his Little League baseball career. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast. Your host, content creator, Johnny FIORICA. Sitting alongside me today, my two trusted co-hosts. First guy on deck, legendary street cop, undercover cop, SWAT cop, homicide detective, David Simpson. Welcome to the pod.
Happy to be here, Jay.
David, I did not clap, just for the record.
You're chippy tonight.
I think
I'm looking forward to it. You're very chippy.
I think you know why.
That voice you hear distracting everybody in the background. Served the Flower City 2.5 decades. Worked Genesee Lake Clinton. Lead hostage negotiator currently for the RPD hostage team. Self-proclaimed alpha male of this broadcast and self-proclaimed 1994 Hall of Famer of what we'd have no idea, Jason Blanchard. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate the intro. I have a question for you. I don't want to steal your script that you so diligently have written out, and it's your Cliff Notes, and we want to make sure we keep things on point. So I just like to start off and ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. Shoot away.
Did you maybe during the course of this week have a conversation with a friend of ours, who's another Hall of Famer, our buddy, Mr. Fairport?
Oh, Jamie Lyle.
Okay. Did you have a conversation with him?
Yeah.
About your 1987 Lazy Susan in your kitchen breaking, and you wanting to repair that you basically took from Bloss Street, I think, and stuck into your cabinets in your home, and it broke, and you bothered my friend to ask him how you could go about repairing that. And by saying how you could go about repairing it, meaning could he come over and repair it?
Yeah. So can I answer this honestly?
Please do.
Okay. Just like every shitty RPD cop that I've ever worked with, you got half the story right.
Right.
Okay. Half the story right. First of all, the kitchen was built in 2020.
Right.
You gave me all. You gave me all the contract.
Okay.
I'll give you that. You gave me all the contract.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
However, mysteriously, according to my daughter, a bottle of maple syrup spontaneously combusted.
Blew up. Roger that.
Apparently at the Unabomber.
Right.
Because,
the Aunt Jemima bottle became a Unabomber.
Known, all he needed was maple syrup in a bottle, and it would have just spontaneously combust, if you will. Yeah, it blew up. But I did call Jamie, and I asked him how we were going to traverse this problem. By we, which is the plural possessive pronoun.
Right.
I was definitely saying him.
Right. Again,
because you're personally attached to the chair.
Huh?
You're personally attached to the
Lazy Susan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just didn't know how to do it, right? Because you guys know I'm not mechanically inclined. So I don't know, I didn't know if you take the Lazy Susan out.
Right.
I didn't know if the thing got inserted up top before the countertop went in. So I called my best friend, my BFF, Jamie Lyle.
Right.
And I asked him for the advice.
By advice, you mean, could you come over and...
Listen, Jay, we're retired, all right? We have to preserve our income. We can't just go and redo the kitchen. When something breaks and we are a little attached to parts of our home, we fix them, all right? We don't just, get all new things.
This is very interesting coming from David over here, wearing his $150 fancy sneakers and his hat and his whole...
Probably more than that.
Oh, man. I mean, this whole thing...
First of all, I've never worn $150.
How he is penny pinching and fixing things in his house. I'm sure he's walking around like Schneider from Good Times with a work belt on, fixing things. Right. David, I'm sure. I apologize.
Listen, we have to make it last, Jay. We have to make it last.
David, I'm sorry. I'm sure that you are there fixing.
I was grinding it
as the children.
I was grinding today.
The honey-do list, you're just checking off.
I was grinding it out today.
Roger that.
And Jason, I never correct you, but Schneider was from One Day at a Time.
What did I say?
You said Good Time.
Good Times.
That was with JJ.
That was a great show too.
That was a great
lot of
title.
classics. A lot of classics.
So listen, let's, if you want to keep with this.
That's okay. I didn't want to distract.
No, not keep with Jamie. I mean, keep with my ineptitude relative to home improvement.
Okay.
It's funny that you said that because on my notes list, so we did have a small bathroom remodel.
Right. I'm aware.
And everybody knows that I possess zero talent relative to doing anything.
Right.
Okay. So I go up into, we have an attic, obviously, and vented the new ceiling fan because I could direct what is wrong, but I can't fix it. So they did not. The contractors were fantastic. I think it was an oversight, minor mistake. They did not put the coil for the ceiling fan to vent it out to the side of the house, which is very important because if it's in your attic, it could cause mold, correct? I do know that much.
There's another way to do it, but go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, so mine should have a coil on there, should be vented. So I go to Lowe's and I go there at like 7:30 in the morning. I don't even know why I was up this early. So I go to 7:30 in the morning, I go to Lowe's and I tell the guy in the back, I go, hey, I got this issue, my ceiling fan. I tell him everything I just told you. And he goes, yeah. Now there's this other like 80-year-old guy on like a 52-foot ladder, like putting toilets up with one arm. The guy was an animal.
That's the guy you need to go to.
Right. So I'm like, hey, what's that thing? You know, because I start talking like I do because I don't know the real name.
Like a 7-year-old.
Like a 7-year-old.
Right.
I'm like,
Like
hey,
the thing,
I got
the coil thing.
Right. I got the thing. I got
The move
the
is
hose.
you take a picture on your phone and you show it. I found that helps.
So I go through this whole thing, right? I'm convinced that Lowe's and Home Depot, the men that work there, which they're men, they're real, they know how to do shit, right? I don't know how to do shit. But I think they enjoy emasculating people like myself. And once they strip your manhood from you,
right,
then they'll help you out. Because what I did was I tried to diffuse it right away. I threw my hands up, waved the white hanky, and I'm like, hey, listen, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I asked the guy, I go, hey, listen, here's the deal. Ceiling fan, no coil, vented out the side of the house. The 80-year-old guy in the ladder just starts like throwing out SKU numbers. It's a 4551, aisle 7, midway down the aisle. And I'm like looking at him, looking at this guy, and they're like, yeah, go down the aisle. It's just, and I'm like, finally the guy looks at me, he's like, buddy, I'll help you out. Because they humiliated me to the point where I think they just felt sorry for me. They went and they got me the stuff that they had to get me. But it just keep consistent with the, I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to.
You'd be perfect for there, Jay.
Well, listen, I also recognize that I can change a light bulb and that's about it. So I'm happy to sub things out to people who know how to do them and get them done properly the first time, so I don't have to redo anything. So I'm good with that. I got zero problem doing that. I don't pretend to know how to fix anything.
Yeah,
painters paint and plumbers plumb.
Listen, have at it. Whatever the cost is, get it done. But Johnny, I do appreciate, as we've talked about, when you tell on yourself.
I do tell myself.
So that way you try to mitigate us finding out after the fact. And then really getting berated.
Well, I just do it with you because I know that you will lambaste me if I don't tell you the truth. So I usually get in front of it.
I do appreciate it.
But my wife's always like, "Oh yeah, you know, I can't believe my husband. He can't do anything." And so my answer to that, and this is going to come horribly, it's going to be interpreted bad.
I love it though. Go ahead.
It's going to be bad.
Go ahead.
So I said to her, "Yeah, I can't do electrical. I can't do plumbing." But when the plumber's house gets robbed, he didn't call another plumber to go help him out, did he? He called a cop, right? Yeah. So I figure that's, and I didn't
stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane, right? I know I had a below mediocre career, but let's face it. I mean, that's all I know how to do. That's all I did do. You know what I mean? But
averagely, but you did.
Yeah, like I said.
But you did do it for 30 years.
I said below
and it's
mediocre.
Impressive. And it's
impressive.
impressive.
You don't call a lawyer to hang drywall.
That's correct.
What's that?
You don't call a lawyer to hang drywall.
Correct me.
Speaking of what a lead, David.
Dave, this guy.
But look at this. I'm going to get.
Listen,
but I'm going to give it.
Listen. Hang on.
I'm a playmaker, boy.
David,
I'm a playmaker.
You see, this is exactly why I'm going to get a finger, the number one finger, just so I'm just going to hold it up.
Comes natural, Johnny.
You just served the teaser softball up to me, don't you?
Good job, David.
Thanks.
So what did you just say?
I don't even remember.
He said
what he had said.
I already forgot.
Mention of a goldfish.
CTE from hockey.
The goldfish.
Yeah.
So you said you don't call a lawyer to hang dry.
You're right. Exactly.
It's funny you said that. So our guest tonight, and we're gonna. I think people are getting sick of this, right? People are getting sick of it. But
us in general, or
I think generally people are sick of when we say, "I can't believe he said, yeah, he's going to come out of podcast." You know what I mean? Again, another person way smarter than us. Okay. He has, let me just get this out. When he signs his name, it's Esquire at the end of his name. Now, Jason, you got something in common with him. You also put Esquire at the end of your name, but that's just to tell people that you got a subscription to the magazine, right?
That's correct.
Right. But yeah, so this guy's he actually earned the title.
Well, listen, we've discussed it too. You could be self-proclaimed, whatever you want. So,
right.
Earn it, don't earn it. It's all subjective. But yes, he has.
I will say this.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and I'm not blowing smoke up his ass.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and I hate to admit it, know, I don't throw out compliments too often. The best.
Yeah. Hands down.
Defense attorney in the area.
Yeah, hands down.
And the guy that most cops don't want to see on the other side of the table when their guy, when they have their big case. And I'll go a step further. When the young guys are like, oh, yeah, who's you represented by? Oh, and you say his name, Joe Damelio.
Yeah.
They kind of go a little crazy. And you then say to them, he'll rock you to sleep.
Johnny, there goes.
It's like Hush Little Baby right here.
Yeah.
This guy is the shit. He is the deal.
So if the people were wondering who was going to be on,
it may be a guy whose name sounds like Joe Damelio.
I couldn't tease it anymore. Man. Just get him in here. Let's go.
It may rhyme with Joe Damelio. It may.
Just get him. Get the Glide Street guy, the 10th.
By the way, we always say the old neighborhood, right? He literally defended everybody from Vincent Street all the way to Mount Reed Boulevard.
And everyone in this room. And everyone in this room at some point, probably.
Folks, we got world famous, world renowned, Esquire, JD, attorney extraordinaire, Joe Damelio next. Stay with us, folks. Gold Shield Pro Services, we're your trusted residential and commercial inspection experts. Call us for one of our professional, nationally certified inspectors to make your real estate investment seamless. At Gold Shield Pro Services, we specialize in thorough inspections, providing you with insights you need to make informed decisions. From pre-sale, post-sale, or annual routine inspections, your number one asset is our top priority. Call 662-7725. That's 662-7725. Or visit us at goldshieldproservices.com to book your appointment today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. The Crime Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, content creator Johnny FIORICA, along with my co-hosts, David Simpson and Jason Blanchard. Folks, tonight we got a great show for you. We have Joe Damelio, Esquire, JD, attorney from Rochester, New York. Joe, you welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. Thank you, guys. It's really an honor to be here and talk to you.
Joe, always a pleasure to see you.
He's lying.
I love Joe. Joe's one of my favorites.
Joey, listen, first of all, we have known you forever. We know everything about you, which in a positive way, that's a good thing. Usually when we have a guest on, we just, for people that don't know you and for some listeners and viewers that might be new to our pod, everyone knows locally that you are a defense attorney. You have private practice that you own personally. Do you mind giving our listeners or our viewers just a background of kind of where you started, where you grew up, and kind of your education, how you got to where you are today?
Sure, John. It's kind of simple, really. I grew up in the city, graduated from Jefferson High School, went to University of Buffalo for undergrad, and then Capital University for law school. Got out of law school. My first office was at the corner of Lyle and Child. And that was right in the middle of the Maple section, or the old Maple section at that time. I think my rent was about $200 a month. And my plate glass insurance was actually more than my rent. And I remember on more than one occasion getting a call from Randy Benjamin in the middle of the night saying, guess where I'm at? And he would be standing in the middle of my office with a broken window. So I wasn't there for probably 3 or 4 years. And then gradually I went to work with Michael Rhodes. You guys probably know Butch or Angelo Rhodes.
Yeah.
His dad. And we were together for good 15 years, maybe 20 years. And always been on my own, but now I'm on my own in another building downtown.
That's cool. Yeah, you mentioned Rambo, RPD royalty. We all love Rambo, Rambeezy. That's funny. I did not know you were at the corner of Lyle and Child.
Violent Child. Wow.
I was right next. I think there's a vape shop there now.
There's two of them.
Yeah, I lived right next door, just west of that same side of the street.
Across from the firehouse.
Right across. Well, actually, across from the old police department.
Yeah.
Right there.
Oh yeah, that's the one that they had that big
that building right at Lyle.
The building still has the police eagles on it, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Great building.
So you were Jefferson High School,
Yep.
which Jason, I'm only going to say this to entertain Jason in a positive way. He loves the fact that we call it the old neighborhood. We say the old neighborhood. People that were there, we say the old neighborhood. So you were at Jefferson. Where did you fall between guys like Joey Morbido and Baxter and those guys?
Let's see. Well, Todd is younger than me.
Okay.
I don't know. Is he your age or no?
I'm 50. I think he's a little older than me.
All right. So he's
I'm 54. I just
okay. So I think Todd's maybe my brother's age then. So
okay.
I think Todd was like Sherman Street, right around there.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Joey Morbido, they lived on Parkway, and we were the same class. So we played, and I think you played at Ninth Ward Little League too. So we played Ninth Ward together. Little League, and went to Jeff, and then we spent a year together at Brockport as well. Brockport State. I went there for a year before I.
Oh, so Joey and you graduated from Jeff together?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
What street were your folks from?
We were from Otis and Sterling.
Okay.
So a little west of Edgerton Park.
Johnny, another Harvard SUNY system alum.
Yeah, but you were only at Brockport for a minute, right? So just one year.
Then I went to UB.
Then he went to UB.
Well, he was, he could still
go ahead, Jason. You could say it.
He can still claim it.
You could say it. Go ahead.
It's the Historian Eagle?
No, it's the Harvard of the SUNY system. SUNY Brockport. So Joe.
No, I think they say Binghamton
No,
now.
Joe. Brockport.
Okay, gotcha.
So wherever David was at.
What's that deal for a year?
And then where, David? Then Fredonia, right? We've all heard. Yeah. It's impressive.
Go Devils.
Well, Joey, if I don't herd the cats, this thing goes out of control. So I got to kind of bring us back to center for a second. So one of the things, I knew it was correct, but we talked on the phone a couple of days ago. I really want you to talk about this because I think it's really super cool. For those that don't know, our Project Exile program is a federal system. It started in Virginia. We adopted it like back in late 90s in Rochester. And it's where, they used to have the exile, you plus an illegal gun equals federal prison.
Right.
But you were the first one to successfully defend your client against an exile charge, correct?
Yeah, you're right. It started in Richmond, Virginia. That was the model city for the exile program. I'm not taking all the credit because I worked with another lawyer so there are two defendants on trial. And I had the privilege, and I mean privilege, of working with John Heumann. And you guys probably don't know him because he's a Buffalo lawyer. He was tops. And Buffalo's, criminal defense bar is so strong. And he was right at the top. And then towards the end of his career, he went to the federal defender's office as they gave him some special title like senior litigant emeritus or something like that, Right. And we tried the case together. I learned more in one trial just watching this guy work. It was incredible. And he said the same about me, which is totally untrue. And I mean, he was 10 classes above me. He was just a brilliant lawyer, and he was fun to work with. And I learned things from him in that trial that I carry with me to this day.
Now, was he almost like I know he was a mentor kind of thing like with this trial, but was he older than you or?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So John, he just passed away a couple of years ago, and, talk about a loss to the Buffalo community. Everyone knew him. Everybody loved him. He was a New York City guy, played basketball at Canisius.
Oh.
People loved him. Juries loved him. He was a terrific guy. Good lawyer too. Excellent. Well,
first of all, I mean, we talk about testifying from a cop's perspective federally. That was one of my, longest my longest testimony ever was 2 days straight, 16 hours on the stand with one of your goombas. Peter Polano was one of the 3 DAs. But I tell you, when you go to that level of court with people like yourself or a Peter Polano or, like a Mikey Schiano or a Mr. Speranza and all those guys, it's kind of like just the facts, man. There's no low ball busting during,
right.
You either have to know your shit as a detective or an officer when we go against people like yourself, or you're just going to get fucking destroyed.
It helps to be prepared. I'll tell you that much. You say Peter, unbelievable lawyer, just great lawyer. And I initially met Peter. I didn't know him. I heard of him when we first started, but I injured my leg. I broke my leg like the day before my brother's wedding or something like that. And I had a trial the next week, and I was behind in preparation for the trial. So Peter came on this particular case with me, and it was like a match made in heaven. We're polar opposites, but and we lost the trial. It wasn't a good case, but our whole goal was to get to the bar before the live feed came on the news. That was it. So we accomplished that anyways.
Well, I'll tell you though, like I said, man, you have as from an investigator standpoint, from a detective standpoint, you have no other choice but to literally study like you're back in college, like you're back in high school. Because the fear of my biggest fear was getting embarrassed on a stand, But so let's talk about one of we talk about it almost every episode because it's something that's near and dear to our heart. But I would love to get your perspective from a defense attorney's perspective. The cashless bail reform. We know why New York State says they created it. And as a collective group from the podcast standpoint, me, David, and Jason, bail reform, we're not saying that our bail system prior to them implementing bail reform was perfect. However, we can honestly say unequivocally, there has to be some changes to the program, maybe kind of a meet in the middle kind of a thing, maybe put all heads on all sides in a room. What are your thoughts currently on bail reform from a defense attorney standpoint?
Well, like as you said, it had to be changed. There's no question about that. I'm sure you guys have gone into the constitutionality of everything, and so it's just unfair for two people charged with the same crime, and bail gets set on one who has money and can afford it, and then the unfortunate one, whoever they may be, they can't afford it, so they stay in that year before jail. And there are studies, and I knew you're going to ask me questions like this, and there's studies, and I've seen them both ways because they use this term criminogenic. Once you get in jail on a lower class felony, and you're there pre-trial, you start assuming, because you have to survive, so you have to align yourself with people. Next thing you know, you're a better criminal coming out than you were going in, and obviously that's problematic. I don't think that's the overriding issue here, but no, I think we needed bail reform. And for the most part, if you think about it, violent crimes, there's still bail on violent crimes, and I think it came at a time to really judge it. And because we use statistics every way. Both sides use statistics to their advantage. And I don't put much trust in it, but you have to lean on something to base your opinion. But you think about it, it couldn't have come to really test this out. It came during COVID, because if you look at the first 18 months when this bill was enacted, and when the law was passed, you did not see a rise in crime. You did after COVID and during COVID. Why? Because people didn't have money, because people were home all day. And that certainly brought a rise to it. Now we're post-COVID, and we're still seeing, it depends who you ask if we're still feeling the COVID fallout or not. Some people say yes. Most people say yes, the business people for sure. And others say, no, we're past that now. And now people are still committing crimes at an alarming rate. Now you look at cities and states that don't have bail reform, such as, the New York and New Jersey type bail reform. You look at cities and states and their crimes on the rise with cash bail. And so I don't know if and I think we're not giving it enough credibility as to the rise in crime throughout the country. Rather, it's easy to say, oh yeah, it's bail reform. And you guys see it because you arrest people on the street all the time. For instance, do we need carve-outs in this law? For sure. Does it have to be tweaked? Absolutely. Kids like the Kia Boys, night after night, day after day, robbing cars, getting caught, going to jail for a night, coming back, and the cycle keeps on going. Yeah. Sure. And in 2022, they made some more changes to the law, including crimes against children, criminal contempt charges, charges against property, that now are, they're starting to figure out how the law needs to be tweaked or carved out, as they say, and whether or not it should stay. I think it should stay in a form where we don't get these multiple repeat offenders coming through. But as far as violent offenders, they're in jail. It's not like they're releasing. And when I say this, there's always a slip. And we're always going to point to New York City because, well, that's where bail reform started, because a young man was in jail 3 years for a petty misdemeanor, ended up killing himself while in jail, just waiting to go to trial when he couldn't afford like a $2,500 cash bail. And that's how it started. Although they've been pushing for it for years, that was the impetus behind, okay, let's get a law and let's try and pass it and then see how it does. And then 2 years later, they tweaked it some more, and they'll continue to do so until we have a decent product.
So what's your thoughts on them? What's your thoughts on a dangerousness standard being implemented on the state side, like the federal side? Yeah, that'd be something that I would think would be something that I would want a judge to have that on his decision-making plate, so to speak, like they do on the federal side. So when you get a guy, then he's got a CPW coming in, and he can sit there and go, okay, there's not a lot of record, but he's walking around with a legal handgun, or this is his second time with a legal handgun,
Yeah, that's a good question, Dave, because as you know, in the federal standard under the Bail Reform Act of 1984 basically talks about two things: flight, risk of flight, and danger to the community. Now, there are certain crimes that, even like a 924C, possession of a firearm and the furtherance of a drug trafficking crime, that's under law inherently dangerous, or there's a presumption of dangerousness, even though the guy didn't point it at anyone. No one got shot. No one got threatened with it just by the mere fact that it's there. That's
drugs and guns.
Yeah.
It's heightened. It's raised up on the federal side.
Right? Judge Saragusa, 20 years ago, wrote an opinion about drugs and guns. And he started off by quoting a Frank Sinatra song, "Love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage." He said, same thing with guns and drugs. When you see one, you see the other.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your thoughts on that being on the state side, giving judges the ability to look at an individual? Like, we talked about a couple cases, like the Sheriff Bachelor was talking about the lady that almost got assaulted or attempted assaulted at Fisher, and
by someone who got let out of.
Well, there was some clear aspects that it would have been nice for a judge to consider the dangerousness aspect, because this individual got a low bail, could afford bail, got right back out, and there was some other alleged attempts with other people immediately after getting out. So my big thing is that I wish the judges could have the same discretion or choice to make concerning dangerousness, not just risk of flight on the state side.
Yeah, and you say risk of flight, but there are other factors involved too. And I think, Dave, what the judges are doing now, they are relying on some of these other things. Like, you can consider the charges. They're not supposed to consider the facts and circumstances behind the charge, but they do. That's the application of it. Yes, the charge, what he's charged with, but getting into the facts of the case, everyone argues it, and the judges hear here on.
So what would be other examples of other things that a judge would take?
First of all, the history of the defendant. Okay.
Criminal history.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
That's the first thing the judge asks for at a bail application. And bail applications, by the way, the law has changed where it's got to be on the record. It's got to be in court. It can't be ex parte. The defendant has a right to be there during the bail application. Before that, we used to do them in the judge's chambers. Now, advantages, disadvantages. You could talk freely about a person back then.
Right.
And when I say you can't talk freely in court, I'm not saying that. You can speak freely in court about your client, but there are things that you wouldn't say on the record that you would say in chambers about a particular situation. So I think the judges now by themselves are considering, like, let me take a look at this record. And then when they get the NISIS or file 15, he didn't appear for court. He's got a failure to appear here, failure to appear here. He also has a violation of probation here, which they can consider. And as far as returning to court. Now, the dangerous aspect, I agree with you. That probably has to change a little bit. And wouldn't you think that would be something that they would or should consider? I would.
I would think that, let's just be general, a criminal comes in front of a judge. I think that would be one of the things in general I would want on my list of things I wanted to consider would be, is he going to show up for court again? And if I let this guy out with bail, what does that do for the victim of this crime or other victims,
Yeah. And the big question is this. So when you talk about dangerousness, that this person's dangerous, what type of evidence is going to be proffered to the court? Is it going to be an FIF, which we know FIFs are not criminal instruments. They're just things for the police to catalog and take care of, unless and until they run into this person again. They look and see, well, let's see what his lifestyle is like. I don't think FIFs should be considered because they're not sworn.
That's an intelligence form. That's more
it's a
field interview form that's used to gather intelligence. Right. No, but that.
So to say someone's dangerous just because a prosecutor goes, well, this guy's dangerous. Well, has he been charged with anything? Has he been convicted of anything? Because if the answer is yes and yes, they have it on the NISIS and they have it on the file 15. And they could even look into, we speak about youthful offender adjudication, which is true. When you apply for a job, if you have a youthful offender adjudication, you can say, no, I've never been convicted of a crime because it's as if you were never arrested. But for purposes of bail, they could look at a YO adjudication for sure.
So, Joe, we're up against a break. We appreciate if you stick with us. I know Jay's chomping at the bit to ask you a question or make a statement. So, folks, we're going to come right back. Joe Damelio. Stick with us, folks. WorkAlerts.com. That's WorkAlerts with a Z. WorkAlerts helps retail, restaurant, hospitality operators control their labor costs and better communicate with their staff through simple, easy-to-use work scheduling and text messaging system. Set budgeted hours for your departments to prevent overscheduling, manage employee time off requests, and availability. Again, that's workalerts.com, WorkAlertz.com. Labor management and employee engagement made simple. Folks, thanks for staying with us. We're the Crime Dawg Podcast, the CDP Boys. I'm your host and content creator, Johnny FIORICA, along with my trusted co-host, David Simpson and Jason Blanchard. You stood with us on the other side of the break. We got defense attorney extraordinaire Joe Damelio with us. Joe, thanks for sticking with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So as you witnessed the fanfare when we were off camera and on break with the two co-hosts that I have, let's just say Jay wants to start off with some questions for you. Politely.
The secret questions.
Joe, I don't understand why I'm being attacked. And I've told Johnny this on several podcasts to him and David that it costs nothing to be nice. And I'd like them to extend a little bit of courtesy towards me, when we're here. And so, Joe, I apologize for all the ugliness behind the scenes. But again, thanks for being here, Joe. I try to keep it above board.
I knew you were going to be like that, Jay. Just knew it. Walking in here today, I got that nice cozy feeling.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. So that leads me to my first statement and then a following question. My first statement is, Joe, that we knew this coming in, right? And I think most guys in our generation and probably younger, right? There's guys like you and Johnny had mentioned Shiano and Cirque and stuff that when we know that we come into court with you guys, we know what it's going to be, but we know that we're always treated like gentlemen. You guys are gentlemen in court, and I don't know that we stress that enough, right? I mean, you have a job to do, and we do as well, but we wouldn't be sitting here, having a great conversation and enjoying each other, and having discussion about it if you guys didn't act the way that you do. So, kudos to you guys for what it's worth, from my opinion.
Jay, what you say makes a lot of sense, because I always tell people, and I tell juries the same thing about police officers. I had a trial. I'm not going to comment too much about it because it's pending sentencing, but I remember speaking to the jury and say, we're not enemies. When I say we're, because I much of my argument is about some things that the police didn't do during the course of this particular investigation and how that raised a reasonable doubt. Well, they didn't believe me. My client ended up being acquitted, but it's tough because first of all, I'm not anti-police, and you don't want to be anti-police to certainly to a jury in Rochester, New York. And you guys might think otherwise, but I think juries in Monroe County are pro-police. They like the police. What's wrong with that? There's nothing, but it's a bias that they have that we have to deal with every day. And I'm not saying it's a bad bias. It's a bias. We all have bias when we walk into a courtroom. But one thing that I tell the juries is, we're not enemies here. We work together in the same system. And if everyone does their job work, then the system really works. So we would expect the lawyers to work hard, to prep hard, to know not only the case law, but the facts of the case, and to represent our clients as zealously and vigorously as we can within the confines of the law. And we expect the police, when they've written a report, an investigative action report or a crime report or an FIF like we were talking about earlier, we expect them to know what they said in the past, what they said before the grand jury, what they said at a suppression hearing, because part of our job is to bring out inconsistencies. And that's the way the trial system works. So I don't think you have to be nasty about it. Look, there are times in the trial where things can get heated between prosecutor and defense attorney, between defense attorney and prosecution witness, and all the way around. And that happens, and that's because, in my opinion, everyone's passionate about their job. They're doing their job as they should be doing it. But when you lose focus on respect for a witness or a witness's title or that type of thing, well, then the juries pick up on that. And then you're just being a bully, and you can't do that.
Well, I think you're right? You try to identify with the juries, right?
Yeah.
When we sit up and testify, I think we look and we make eye contact just like you guys do, and you're trying to drive points home about what your position is and what the facts are and so on and so forth. I had one other question for you, and I know you're a hometown guy. Johnny mentioned the neighborhood growing up. You came back to Rochester. Were you ever inclined to ever go anywhere else, out of state or in state, and not come back home and apply your trade here?
Yeah, I went to law school in Columbus, Ohio, which is a great city. And
I hate Ohio State.
Well, I know you do, but go Bucks.
Oh man, I hate Ohio State.
Great city. And in law school, of course, I worked a law clerk for a firm for a couple of years, and I got offered a job, but I didn't even consider it. I just wanted to come home. And that's where my family was, and that was my thinking: find a job and get to work.
We talked about the same thing, right? I went, to college, and I never crossed my mind to leave Rochester. My family was here, my friends were here, my bases were here, and same reason I came back, and I don't regret it a bit. Other than the weather.
I tried to leave. No one wanted me.
You tried to leave?
Yeah.
So, David, we were talking on break, and you were saying that you wanted to ask Joe some stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we always talk about how it's a game. And as a detective, there's the street stuff, and then there's the trial stuff. And I spent a lot of time in the federal system, and I worked with Frank Sherman, who is I think famous or well-known, legendary federal prosecutor. and we talked a lot about how trials work, and he always was we broke it down into like a sports analogy, if you will. And he was always like, the prosecution is on offense and we in the defense is kind of on defense. It seems somewhat simple. And he says, don't make a mistake in an investigation that's a turnover, because then it allows the defense to then go on the offense. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I'll just segue with that thing where my mentality was, because I got to pick his brain. I never got to ask you, what is the singular thing when you go into a trial that and every trial is different, I get that, but where do you spend the most time? Like if you had to look down in a major case, is it the closing? Is it picking apart a crucial witness? Is it your opening? Like what is the thing that you think is like the thing where you can take a bad case and make it great, or you can make it win? What's the most important thing?
It's so simple. It's preparation. That's it. Every lawyer has their own personality, and some people cross a certain way or a certain style, and other people cross a certain way and a certain style. Obviously, you have to have command of the courtroom. And you know, when I first started, I was a courtroom junkie because we had the best defense attorneys. I used to watch, in 1 week, I could see John Peronello cross a witness. I could see John Speranza cross a witness. I could see Felix Lapine. I mean, these guys are like Hall of Famers, you know. Mm-hmm. Felix Lapine, brilliant. And same thing with John Peronello and John Speranza and David Moranti. I mean, these guys I was in awe of them. And I'd bring my notebook and my pen, and I'd literally write out every question that they would ask.
Well, you're the only defense attorney I've seen. I remember testifying, and you sat in on a couple of my times testifying, and we're sitting there with your notebook.
Well, I was just trying to get your number. I was trying to figure out
you got my
any
number.
Flaws or ticks in your system.
So that's interesting. That's interesting stuff.
Yeah. So Dave, preparation, you have to, for every hour you spend in a courtroom, you're probably spending 5 in preparation. And then don't forget, you have to prepare for everyone on their list. Now they give you a list, but it's not really a witness list. It's names that may come up. But if they put them on that list, you better be prepared to cross-examine that witness. So you're preparing for a lot of witnesses that they never call. But that's the nature, like you say, of the game. But yeah, preparation is the key. You know, obviously staying in command of the courtroom. And thinking on your feet is a difficult thing to do at times. So how are you most comfortable thinking on your feet? When you have command of the facts and command of the law, then it gets a little bit easier. You just said something, Frank Sherman, who I've tried cases, brilliant prosecutor, does not get phased. A lot like Judge Randall. When I say don't get phased, they try the case as though you're not in the room. And you can't get under their skin, even if you were trying to, because they're not going to allow that. They will ask a question, and if it's not the right way, they will ask it and ask it and ask it. Makes a beautiful record. It might not sound like much, but it's such a simple way of doing it and simple way of thinking. But they're brilliant in what they produce at trial. So, talking about that ball game, my theory has always been, because we know in trials, there isn't some guy in the back of the courtroom who's going to jump up and say, I did it, you know, and then you solve the case like you see on TV.
Right.
So I subscribe to the million hits, million runs. You don't have to hit home runs, but you hit enough singles and you're going to score runs. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
I had a detective, Tommy Janis, who you know well. He used to tell me, if you know where a defense attorney's office is, when we leave work, drive by. If their light's on, they're going to be a handful. If the light's not on,
that makes sense.
So they're home at 6 o'clock and they're on trial.
Yeah, good for you the next morning when you testify. Yeah, right. It's true.
But if it's 9 o'clock, you know, you've had a couple of beers and, you know, you're going home and, you know, you're going to testify the next day, and all of a sudden you swing by someone's office and their light's on and it's 9:30 at night and they're still working.
Yeah, better take a couple of Advil and get to bed.
I got Jody tomorrow.
It's funny that you said that, though, because Jody's office, his old office, used to be on State Street.
I know exactly where it was.
Everybody know, right?
Yeah.
And I can't believe you said that because you literally stole my line, because I was going to say Jody's light was always on way past 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night.
He never goes home.
Way past.
Ask him. He never goes home.
Yeah.
That's why I'm telling you, if you get in trouble, you call this guy. He never goes home. He doesn't have Little League coming up with it. He doesn't have that. He works, this guy.
Yeah.
That's why he's a handful.
Folks, stick with us. We got Joe Damelio, premier defense attorney, Rochester, New York. Stick with us after the break. Crime Dawg Podcast. We're coming right back at you. Asher Beverages, the Rock's leader in old style homemade lemonade. It's Asher's secret recipe, so don't bother asking. If you're looking to impress, want to be one of the cool kids, and be the hit at your next party, bring one of Asher's delicious drink concoctions with you. Asher Beverages old style homemade lemonade is the way to go. Asher Beverages are available at all local retail outlets. Folks, thanks for sticking with us. We're the Crime Dawg Podcast. Your host and content creator, Johnny FIORICA, along with my co-hosts, David Simpson and Jason Blanchard. Joe Damelio is our guest tonight. Joe, thanks for sticking with us on the other side of the break, brother. We, as cops, I know we talked about bail reform, and I mean, I could pick your brain from a cop's perspective for hours, because I love to hear, and we call it the quintessential, the other side, in a respectful way. But one of the other things that's changed in the recent past is discovery. And for those people that don't understand discovery, if you could explain to our audience what discovery is from a legal standpoint, and explain to them what changed from where it was to where it is today.
Sure. So discovery is very simple. It's what the other side must disclose to the other before trial. Our discovery laws, Article 245 was enacted in 2020. And before that, Article 240 was our discovery law. So there was obviously a statewide push and movement, not only in New York State, but mostly every other state in the continental U.S. To change some of the discovery laws. The first question would be, well, was it warranted? And I guess the best way for me to put it is, before 2020, when you had a trial, the prosecution, and think about this, the prosecution did not and was not required to give you the grand jury minutes, the transcript of what witnesses testified to before the grand jury until the trial began. So talk about being put behind the 8 ball. You're preparing for trial. You're doing everything you possibly can, but you don't know what these witnesses said in front of the grand jury. You don't know what their sworn testimony was. We were so far behind the rest of the country in that regard. New Jersey, on the day of arraignment, upon indictment, you get the grand jury minutes. You get them. And what does that do? It promotes plea bargaining, because a lawyer can look at the grand jury minutes and say, hey, we're going to have a problem here. They may be able to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, even though that's not the standard before the grand jury. So up until 2020, we were literally handed grand jury minutes at the time of trial, right before the first juror is sworn, which is really a disadvantage. You can't be effective as an attorney. You cannot, and the Sixth Amendment guarantees us, each citizen, the right to effective assistance of counsel. How effective can you be if the day of trial, you're just finding out what a witness testified to before the grand jury? So yes, changes had to be made. And, obviously I'm sure the police, I'm sure the prosecutors, complain about it, because there are many things they must do now to ensure that they're compliant with Article 245. Has it gone too far the other way? Because we hear that too. And like anything else, 245 had to be tweaked, and it will continue to be tweaked. The courts know it, and the lawyers know it as well, that that's something to contend with. But we most certainly needed to change the discovery laws. 245 has made it easier for the defense, or it gives you the whole picture, so you can really be effective as a defense attorney when you go to your client, because your client's going to say, well, what evidence do they have against me? Well, I have these reports here, but I don't know what the eyewitness who didn't take a sworn deposition, or a new witness who they learned about prior to grand jury, what they said and testified to.
Was that always the case?
Always.
Like they would give it to you always right
Day
when
of trial.
Start? It would never get there before. It was always pretty much.
Yeah. Every once in a while, when you caught a prosecutor who wanted to give you a break, the weekend before.
Or maybe
trial.
wanted to generate a plea. Maybe they would give you it before to show you. Like,
but very rare. You would never get it. It's like sometimes they'll give the weekend before, I'll send you over a grand jury. Because what's the difference? To me, what's the difference? Why are we hiding? Because discovery is so there are no nothing hidden. So there's no trial by ambush, which the Constitution guards against. So
and Joe, not to get too far over our skis, but to and I know we're talking about a lot of legal stuff, and for those that aren't cops or attorneys listening to this, so when you talk about discovery, I picture it almost like a felony package, right? Where you're talking about the report that the original police officer wrote, any type of reports that were supporting the crime report that other officers wrote or investigators wrote, or court complaints or depositions, which are sworn statements that the cops take from witnesses or people with knowledge. You're talking almost like a whole package.
A book.
John, even today with body-worn camera footage, you're talking about megabytes and terabytes of evidence that it's not something you can go over in a week.
Right. So you're talking about discovery, not only the paperwork relative to what the cops generate from the original written report that they take, all the supporting reports, all the legal documents, but you also have body-worn camera footage. You also have
blue light camera footage, DOT,
correct,
surveillance cameras on businesses, police officers' notes, your little notebooks. Those things.
Do you do all your prep? Do you go through all that yourself?
You have
to. But you do it yourself.
You have to know it. Yeah.
So he's asking.
You don't use investigators. You don't use support staff?
I do use an investigator, but I have to know it, and the attorney has to know it. Investigators are certainly helpful, but
they can at least tell you what not to. You don't need this is nothing. This is
you get no. You have to go through everything, but investigators you're going through discovery, and how I have a private investigator, David Mack, that I use, and I've used them forever. You read something like, this witness says this, but this report might say something different. I give him a memo, go out and visit Miss Jones, see what she has to say, talk to her, see, show her her report, show her that. So that's what the investigators do. Or come to the scene with me. And let's take some measurements, or let's walk it off, pace it off, see if what the story that we're getting, first of all, is physically doable. If it's physically, it could have happened that way. And then maybe, and then work backwards from there.
Joe, we touched on it, and I was going to ask you before you brought it up. I know what our opinions were of body-worn cameras when we were initially getting them, and everybody was apprehensive about it. And our opinions have drastically changed because it shows an overall view and picture of how things were when, 6 months later, when you're sitting in court and now the defense attorney or the defendant is trying to pretend like this wasn't a volatile situation or it was what it was. Have you found that as a defense attorney, the body-worn cameras are they beneficial? Are they a negative? Are they indifferent? Is that kind of too broad of a question to ask?
No, it's not. I could even break it down for you. For instance, in violent felony cases, they're so crucial. I think for both sides, it really lays it out. You can go to your client and say, hey, here's the body-worn camera. You could play it for your client. This was going on at this particular time. Or this is how the officer was acting towards you, or this is what you were saying or your friend was saying. That's all, you could touch it, you could feel it, you could look at it. It helps the defense, even if it's bad for the defense, it helps us to understand what was going on there and then. Flip side, DWI cases, body-worn camera, I tell you, the camera helps defendants because they're never as bad as what's contained in the police reports. It just doesn't seem that way. And it may be one of those things where, you're watching a football game and the announcers are going, wow, it's coming down heavy right now. And you're watching the game. You're like, I can't even see that it's raining right now. So there might be some of that because even in DWI cases, you can't smell the guy's breath and you can't see whether or not his eyes are bloodshot, watery, glassy. But I think it helps like in those field sobriety tests because if you're looking at him, that guy didn't do as bad as the police were saying. And I'm not saying he's lying or wrong. It just doesn't appear that way.
The old perception, perception is reality,
right?
For
sure.
So now a jury's watching a video and you can walk them through it and say,
right.
Well, it says this, but
So Joe, it's interesting that you said it because David and I talk about it all the time. We flip flop from a detective point of view, the BWCs of body worns to the cameras in interview rooms. And I had no problem with them because, my gigantic ego.
But John, don't forget, you did it the right way. And I'm not pointing fingers or saying anything, but if you did it the right way, you wouldn't have a problem with cameras.
I thought it was easier. Like
with cameras?
I loved it. I loved it. I loved it because
plus you're on show. It's showtime and everyone gets to see your work. Like you don't have to write about it. It's just press play.
Yeah. It was a lot easier from a detective's point of view. And speaking of Tommy Janis, I'll tell you this right now. TJ, I love TJ to death because when I was a young kid, Miranda really confused me. It's something that is so simplistic, but from a detective point of view, and I looked at TJ one time, Tommy Janis, and I said to him, he goes, Johnny, you read Miranda if the guy takes a piece of bubble gum from Rite Aid or if he does a murder.
It's true though. Yeah.
There's no trick. There's no trick on Miranda. That's right. That Tommy Janis told me, and he told you. I was like, "How do you read Miranda?" He goes, "You read it."
Yeah, you read it.
Like
you read
no magic.
Don't investigator. Fast,
there's no pixie dust you sprinkle on it. There's no like voodoo go on. You read it and you put it away. And he's either going to say. Sometimes they say, "I don't want to talk to you."
Right.
They say they do.
And the thing is, and I want to, we talk about body worns, and Jay made some good points with body worn cameras, and relative to the interview room, the boxes we call it from an investigator standpoint, I loved it in there because I know that when I was at a Huntley hearing, which shows the voluntariness of a statement that a defendant, your clients give me. I didn't put him in a headlock. I didn't threaten him. I didn't do anything untoward toward your client or a client.
And you read a Miranda.
That's it.
Yeah.
Period. Do you find that do you have like an oh shit moment when you're like, oh my God, this guy said everything on camera? Or
no, I don't feel that way. I'm like, okay, the cop read him his warnings when he was supposed to read them. He read all of the warnings. Do you understand the warnings? Yes, I do. Do you want to give up that right and talk to me now? Because even Miranda says there's no talisman for exactly what you need to say. Other than you have to tell him he's got to write to a lawyer. If can't afford one, one will be provided to him, and he can stop at any time he wants to stop. But they have an RPD form, and when you see them now, they take the form out and they read the form, and then I don't know. That part is never. The sufficiency of Miranda warnings is never the question now. The question now is whether or not they should have read them earlier because A, he was in custody, and B, interrogation commenced. Or then there's always, and it's usually not a police thing, defendant makes a statement, maybe I should have a lawyer. Well, that's not, and it's got to be an unequivocal request for a lawyer. Maybe I should have a lawyer. That's not asking for a lawyer. That's what the courts say. Yeah. Or do you think I need a lawyer? And that's the tough one. That puts the police in a bad spot. Yeah. Dave's saying no. But and the standard response is, listen, I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice. So those are the things that we think about now that are most litigated. Defendants' word usage. And whether or not that's equivocal or unequivocal.
So my follow-up question, Joe D, is this. So when I interrogate somebody in the interview room and they give a full-blown confession. And I know that there is a multitude of extraneous variables relative to an investigative case, aside from the confession. And you touched upon a couple of them, you know what I mean? Like, kind of like, how did you get here, right? So I come at the end, right? They bring me in, they put the guy in a box, I read him his Miranda legally, he confesses, but was a stop legal? Was this legal?
Yeah.
So when you get the video of me or David or Jay interrogating a guy in the interview room and he gives a full-blown confession, as a defense attorney, you're looking like, okay, I get it. You had my client here. He admitted everything, but now you got to kind of put the puzzle together backwards and say, how did you get the guy there?
John, you hit the nail on the head. What I do is me. Everyone's got their own style, and believe me, we have a great defense community here, criminal defense community here in Rochester. But the way we were taught, like we always go to these continuing legal education CLEs that we're required to do, and every once in a while you can pull out something good. And what I learned early on is, especially with the body worn camera stuff, don't look at it until you've been through the entire felony package, until you've seen what the witnesses said. So you could be in that guy's shoes as he walks into the room, or as you walk into the room with him. And it kind of makes sense to do it that way. Some people rush as soon as they get the video and they want to see it. And I do everything else first, just because I want to know what was going on in that guy's mind as you walk into the room and start questioning him.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's funny because when and I'm just saying it honestly, not arrogantly, but as I started telling everybody I was getting ready to retire, I had people in the defense community reach out, and I was like, hey, when you retire, if I call you, do you want to take a look at this package? And it was the money was very tempting. It was, the offers were very tempting. But it was almost like being a Buffalo Bill your entire life. And then all of a sudden you get a great offer from the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
And it's just, and I mean that tongue in cheek, and I mean that honestly. It's just, I just couldn't trust.
Do it.
I couldn't do it.
Well,
and it's just, it's hard, because I'll tell you this though, cops are unforgiving, right? Our community is unforgiving. And if they did it right, now I personally would have no problem. I have never had a problem that if there was a retired cop in a jurisdiction that I worked with, that was retired, or from another jurisdiction that was helping out a defense attorney on a case that I worked with, I had no problem with them helping out or looking. I really didn't. I didn't.
I see. I don't like it. It's just me.
But I didn't.
Why you think they're selling out?
There's exceptions to the rules, but I think, and it's just my opinion, I am the biggest asshole ever to live, but so I feel like you put your whole career, I feel you put your whole career, fighting for one thing, and risk and just like you give it everything you got. And I just, for no amount of money and I love you, and there's a defense attorneys that I love. I could take a look at something maybe, but to go and work.
What if there was an injustice that you saw? Because listen, it happens all the time.
Well, you got an investigator. You don't need me.
No. I'm saying so. You. I don't think you're fighting for one thing. You're fighting for justice first of all, right? Ultimately, you're fighting for justice.
I don't know that David's the most articulate person in the world, but
I actually think
David. I hate to ever agree with you, but I would say this. I would say that what. I see your side. I see Johnny's side. I also see David's side. And I guess my only thing would be, I would have a hard time coming in, and maybe you would agree with this, coming in and scrutinizing a colleague when I was retired, and saying that, they did it, because there's, there's 100 ways to skin a cat, right? And just because I think that something could have been done differently or whatever, for me to say that that person did it wrong or different, I don't know that I would want to be in that position. So, same way that I guess maybe if somebody wanted you to look at another, case and people
Good
that
point.
you respect and work with, maybe you wouldn't want to come in and say, well, they did it wrong, because it might not be wrong. It just might not have been the way that you would have done it.
I think that whatever your profession is, if you're not objective, if you cannot see both sides and understand both sides, or you have blinders on, you're doing a disservice to whoever you're working for. I find, and I've found over the years, that the police officers that I have come up against, the best ones, the toughest ones, are the ones that could always see both sides. Because once you have blinders on, that helps me. It really does.
And that's what I was saying. Like I could say two statements about what we're talking about. I would never do it, but when I knew my brother or sister officers or detectives had retired and went to that side, and I was still active law enforcement, I was never offended by that, because I knew that the case that I put forward, I was never intimidated by anybody reviewing it. I'm not saying I won them all, but I had no problem. So in retirement, I couldn't do it, only because of the things like Jay and the guys were saying, like I told you about Buffalo Bills and Miami Dolphins. But the second thing is I will tell you, I had no problem with anybody, and I'm not just saying this, I had no problem with anybody from my side going over to the quote unquote other side helping out, because it was the onus as a detective fell on me. To put together a good case, to put together a package that I knew that would sustain the scrutiny of somebody that was at your level, or a Mr. Sprans, or a Mikey Sheehan, or any other the other high profile defense attorneys. I had no problem with it.
See, maybe it's my ego. I feel like if I went on that and did that, I could find things there, whether the person did it or didn't do it, but find things to pick apart a case to help someone possibly get off on something that I know they did, just because I have a certain skill set, and what I was good at doing, that might help the bad guy, if you will, when I spent my whole career working on the other side. That's kind of, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying if you're good at what you do, I'm not talking about the guy that was maybe an injustice. That's clearly, I would never want to see someone, and I truly mean this, go to jail that didn't do it. I totally can see both sides. But I feel like I could take a very good case that Johnny put together, and he's a great detective, but there's things in there, as good as you are and as good as I was, that you could find to pick apart and to give you in minutia that would help a case. And I don't know if I got someone to walk on that, whether I would feel good about that. I guess that's where I could.
And I think the case that you just spoke about is extremely rare. Whenever I've had an investigator, like I can't remember the last time I'm like, see what this cop did and see if he did it right or wrong. It doesn't work that way. The Constitution will determine that. Your general orders, okay, you violated a general order. It's not law. It's your own department's policy. Might be something to talk about, but it's certainly, it's that has nothing to do with the charges against the defendant. So it'd be very rare that I would say, see what this officer did, because the case law and the Constitution is gonna lead that. Did he ask the right question? Did he not read Miranda? I don't need an investigator to tell us that. So they're more into piecing things together, gathering information, things like that. And if you're objective, you're objective. David, I think you'd be a great investigator.
Once upon a time.
But
tired.
But we would never ask you to, like, all right, check out FIORICA, see if he did.
No, but I'm looking, I know where they're, I don't want to say where they are. I don't want to say where they are, in my opinion, but I know where the soft spots might be. And maybe they're not with the investigation, maybe possibly with crime scenes. I would just,
oh, okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? And
yes.
I would not want to delve into that area of soft spots, knowing what I know behind the curtain and giving that, I don't know, I'd feel.
Giving that to the presumptively innocent person.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. Okay.
Very well worded, Joe.
As all.
That's why you get paid.
Yeah. That's why he's the man.
That's why he gets the big bucks.
Joe D, we can't thank you enough for gracing us on our set. The second guest at the Crime Dawg Podcast studio. It was truly our pleasure to have you here with us on behalf of David Simpson and Jason Blanchard and our super producer, Danny Agnew. We can't thank you enough. Folks, Joe Damelio, Esquire. Thanks for coming, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joey.
Thanks, Joey.